We can get started here because whether we have a fantastic blockbuster idea or this turns into a dumpster fire of oh God, what have we done? The popcorn will flow. So, um, all right. So for all of you playing at home in Sprigg's channel in here, um, the four elements of this world that we want to adjust the core vanilla settings out of the player's handbook, the DMG, are that this is a sci-fi theme. And in particular, that doesn't just mean lasers and robots, or even that we allow or disallow the antimatter rifle that's in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Which maybe we do. I don't know yet. But the primary concern is that we're focusing on what the things in this world are and do. People, of course, exist, but the people are exceptional because of the things. And so we need a system or a way that we can create magic items. We can create fantastic things, and the things empower the people more than we have the superhero who is from within an exception by that person's existence. This world, no matter the locale, the real life influence of this is a fantasy Canada, a fantasy Mexico, a fantasy Korea, a fantasy India, everyone in this world is going to play by these rules. It will just have local flavors that we can have a lot of fun with. But it's a low magic system, so it's in the hands of some. It is known to a lot of people. Not everyone may have a phone or a fancy phone, but you know generally what it does and what it's supposed to do. And if you had one in your hand, you could probably operate it. It's just maybe you don't always have access to one. This is a hard magic system.
So bad with smartphone.
Well, considering what happened to your last one,
Yeah.
now, a hard magic system doesn't mean that it's a difficult magic system. It simply means magic is
There's
known,
clear rules.
it's quantifiable, and that these are more or less... Magic is special, but in so much that a hammer is a magic spell that puts a piece of metal in a piece of wood. It's a tool to be used. It overcomes problems. It's not necessarily the cause of a problem like what you'd have in a soft magic system. Magic's a problem in a soft system.
Alchemy.
Yeah.
Wood and metal.
And then they stick together through some extra magnetic, extra gravitational force. Whereas in a soft system, magic is the problem because you don't understand it. You don't know how it works. It can come from anywhere, and you have to solve it through traditional means. You can understand gravity just fine, but if someone doesn't play by those rules, that's the problem. And then the last consideration, and where we left off with this idea from Sprigg, the source of magic, you all in chat when we were going through this exercise, you wanted it to not be alchemical where you have to, like, you're changing something that exists into another thing, or there's really no cost. It is true magic in that you get something for nothing, or that it is a black box of idea goes in, magic, question mark, and then you get result. In this case, the source of magic, where it plays into the hard magic, it's known, or even the sci-fi, that this is going to be more item-focused. I want us to have compelling characters, but it's about these things, too. There must be a personal cost. Blood magic. It decreases your life expectancy. It creates a hunger, an addiction. It affects your sanity, your memories. This is very personalized, which is interesting because then we have this concept of, like in the Matrix, you are the battery for the machines that are keeping you in the system. So how are our characters going to be both batteries but also enhanced by the tools that we're using? Um, so ideas that I threw out that we don't have to stick to. Everyone in the world is a level 0 character. If you haven't heard of that, it's your race and your background. A class is a bonus you get on top of it. And so, oh, go ahead.
There's also a separate set of things called rookie characters.
Mm-hmm.
But that's another thing entirely.
Okay.
Rookie is you pick a class, you're still level 0, but you get, what was it? You get 1 skill proficiency. Unless the class would get more than 2, then you get 2.
Mm-hmm.
And you get the proficiencies, but you don't get any of the abilities.
Alright, I'll add that note. Level 0/rookie. So without this gear, everyone in the world is low power. So the people are pretty much, not that you can't have a strong person or a smart person or a weak person or whatever, but people are generally flatter on the curve than those who have access to these things. Think mech warriors in BattleTech. This would be, or like job crystals in Final Fantasy. In BattleTech, and I mean, Derek is here and can certainly vouch, the mechs are awesome, and mechs have such variety. They can do all kinds of things. It just so happens that you need a piece of meat inside, and when that piece of meat is outside that canopy, outside that cockpit, a handgun can kill the preeminent 20-year hardened mech warrior, just as a long-range missile barrage that manages to penetrate through. You are a piece of meat outside that mech. That is an idea, a stress or something that could be baked into this.
Cyberpunk is another good source of similar thing of you have implants that are either biotech or cyberware that give you these superhuman abilities, but are not they're not an inherent thing. You don't just inherently have these abilities for the most part.
And
then
heaven help you if your Chrome breaks or you get like an EMP wave that takes it out of commission. Yeah. Prices paid for magic could be hit points, ability score, damage, or drain. A 7th ability like sanity or honor, because we did cover that out of the DMG, and you brought that up as well. Hit dice, alignment or background changes. Time might be a price as well, reflected by accelerated aging. And I thought about that after we wrote that, I said, how would that work? And I said, wouldn't that be interesting if at character creation you almost had this weird connection with your character where you didn't just roll the age. Because if you remember when we started our conversation, a lot of people give a thought to how old their character is currently. But we don't often think about when would that end come. Whether it's 700 years from now or 7 minutes from now. And I thought, if something like that existed, without making things convoluted, but perhaps putting a stress on the value of one's life or the importance of their potential as a battery or as an energy source. If in this world you had whatever list, it doesn't matter what the races are. It could be humans and tabaxi and kobold, and those are the only 3 that are allowed or whatever. Doesn't matter. The idea is, if humans have an average lifespan of 70 years, at character creation, you don't just roll your current age. You also roll or somehow determine when outside of an imposed force. I'll keep it PG-13. outside of an imposed force, when you have that knowledge as the player, when your character would actually die. And therefore, if there was a time cost to spells or making magic items, you simply subtracted a day, a week, a month from that total, because then over time, your current age and your maximum age, it's sort of like your hit points. You have current hit points and you have maximum hit points. You're borrowing from your future to get immediate results now. And whether or not that's broadly magic, or let's say any time that curative magic is used on you, maybe that just reflects you've sped up your recoverability. If it takes 3 weeks to heal a broken bone or something, then you can have it now, but you're taking 3 weeks off your character's lifespan because you're paying for the instant result. I'm sorry, go ahead now.
So I'm here for the idea,
Mm-hmm.
but this is actually something that I wrote for my Vitalist class for my setting handbook.
Okay.
Mechanically, that's how the magic works in setting, but it's not fun. is an important detail. Is
Yeah.
like it's not fun because it's bookkeeping that's not like actively going to be something that you think about. It's just something that you're gonna have to write down every time that you cast a spell, and it's gonna sneak up on you, and then you're gonna have a moment where you're like, oh, I don't get to play anymore. So I understand it, and like at certain tables it could be good, but as a rule, it's more fantasy than it is class fantasy, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's a term that I use a lot, and it's very, very important in like the design of making a game fun to play, is class fantasy, which is, this is the thing that I want to play, and this is how I want it to feel.
Yeah.
So like a spellcaster doesn't want to feel like they have the hourglass tipped over and it's always burning down. They want to feel like they're doing the cool thing at a price. So it's hard to conceptualize that price when the price is the hourglass.
Mm-hmm.
So like the way that I do it in my system at least is it costs hit points, and then higher level spells also cost hit dice. So it costs from your hit points and then your ability to recover from losing those hit points. So it's a price that you pay now, and that you see the price of it later as well.
And she brings up, I'm talking with my mouth full, sorry. She does bring up a good point. Being an author of a book where you get to write every aspect of a magic system is a lot different than even with that full communication that we opened up and we talked about. It's fine if you disclude tieflings. It's fine if you don't, like for me, I don't have extra dimensional spaces. I don't have come back to life magic. But you got to communicate that, and not everyone may want to play. And you don't need a system that everyone should play. That's ridiculous. That will never exist. But there is certainly a point where people go, well, I get it, but that doesn't sound fun. I do want to be able to play something and really become involved, or understand I'm in a living world where this is a commonly accepted thing, such that where Aarakocra exists, a lot of people have ranged attack proficiencies or things that are handy to bring them down. A lot of people are culturally and or mechanically prepared to live a shorter, burnt-out life by being special, by being a magician or a magic item crafter or something like that.
So Barnarcos is asking me about, can I express further on how I want it to feel, like the idea of the class fantasy? So, I'm trying to think about it, like, What's the character that you played, Burn Recluse? What's a character that you've really enjoyed? Whether it's a video game, tabletop RPG, just anything along those lines, I can kind of try to fill in what I mean by a class fantasy, because for a lot of people, they have a hard time conceptualizing the idea of the class fantasy, and that's why it's a very important thing in, like, designing of the system for a game like this. You're a cleric or an alchemist? Okay, so, like, when you play an alchemist, for an example, you make potions, right? That's kind of your gimmick. It's the idea of being an alchemist. Correct? So, like, that feels safe to assume? So, in Pathfinder, as an example, an alchemist can be a spellcaster and never actually make potions. So that, like, mechanically you're an alchemist, but it's not fulfilling the class fantasy of being an alchemist. In the same way as, like, an artificer in D&D is someone who makes magic items is what they're supposed to be. But in 5th edition D&D, an artificer is... you just cast spells, but they look like machines that you build. So it mechanically does the thing that they say it does, but it doesn't fulfill the class fantasy of what it sets out to be. And that's what I mean by, like, how you want it to feel being part of the class fantasy. There's an expectation, given the name and, like, description of what you're playing, that you want it to feel a certain way. So being a spellcaster, for example, if you want to play as a wizard or as mage or whatever different kind of spellcasters, in this setting, the idea of that is it's a spellcaster who has to pay a terrible price to use their magic. We're not playing something today, Cookie. We're here talking about TTRPG and the creation of them a little bit. So yeah, the idea of that class fantasy is like the fighter fights, the berserker berserks, the mage casts spells, the archer shoots arrows. Those are our expectations that we come into it, and fulfilling the class fantasy of those things is like the archer shooting the arrow from super far away and piercing the first arrow they fired down the middle. The master swordsman parrying every blow from his foe and then kicking him down the stairs. The mage undoing the centuries-old glyph that seals the door to the tomb. All those things are moments that fulfill the class fantasy. Hi, Genie Problem. So those are just, like, important things to think about when you're designing anything mechanically, is you want it to feel as much as possible what you want it, what you expect it to be like. It's actually been, because you brought it up earlier as an example for this system, it's actually been one of my biggest complaints of Final Fantasy XIV.
Okay.
It is, like, it has a lot of classes, but they don't really fulfill the fantasy very well because you just kind of, like, push button. That's my attack button. I push it because it's the attack button. Now mind you, I played Warrior when I played through it on stream, and that was, like, apparently the wrong way to experience the content, because it's push this button until you unlock the AoE skill. Then when you're fighting more than two things, push that button.
It does have, because it does come into the game of numbers for there. you effectively need all your DPS to produce the same numbers, and the contrivance is the different ways you cause the same result. And once you turn all the special effects off, it's a waltz. 1, 2, 3 combo.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3 combo. 1, 2, 3 combo. 1, 2, 3
But
dot. 1, 2,
it's
3
why I
dot.
always like refer back to Arcage, because it does the exact same concept, but it does it with much greater class fantasy fulfillment. Which is really funny because it doesn't even have classes in that game. Instead of classes, it gives you 3 skill trees, and then you mix and match, and you pick 3 of them together to create your class. So like, to use the really simple example, warrior in Final Fantasy is like, in combat you press your hit guy button, and then you press the combo hit guy button, and then you rinse and repeat. So in Arcage, you have basically the same thing. You have dash button, hit guy button. They're right beside each other, they do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But what they did to combo them is your dash button throws you up against the guy and then pins them in place. And then your hit guy button trips someone who's been knocked in stuck in place. And then the second hit of it does bonus damage against someone who's been tripped. So instead of this button just isn't as good unless you push that button first, it's this button. Oops, sorry. It's this button rewards you for pushing that button
Wrong
first.
Wrong button!
I bumped the spring on my arm. So like, they're both tab target systems. They both mechanically are the same thing of just like mashing the same 2 buttons. But you have a tangible reward for doing, like, pressing the first button, then the second button. Instead of special effects and number go up.
Well, to keep things, to draw on good examples of from other things that we've played or we've read, you did bring up some sort of maybe like an aptitude score. It's that 7th score that you talked about. And in fact, that might be interesting because that would mean you have a cleric that doesn't have to be wise. It's just your magical potential, your magical aptitude. You can have a completely uncharismatic and a very unwise cleric, because maybe you want to sacrifice your wisdom, and so that's good role play. Because really, every caster, yeah, they're casting off a different stat, but it might as well be the same stat because we've built them differently in our workshops, but flow with the skepticism. Every warlock has a high charisma score. Every wizard has a high intelligence. Every druid has a high wisdom. Every bard has a high charisma also. It might as well be the same score because unless you are going out of your way to challenge yourself to actually play the low intelligence wizard, everyone's gonna cap out that score the same way and redline that same potential. So this would actually encourage a wizard can be powerful, but also dumb as hell, and that could be a lot of fun to have. To have that kind of phenomenal cosmic power, but itty bitty brain case.
I actually played a while back, just as an example. I played a Kobold Artificer with 13 intelligence.
Ah.
She was the camp mom, and she was a muscle kobold.
Yeah. You could have a wizard that casts fist with his or her actual fist in this case. Now, if we're looking at this,
thank you for the follow, Gamzy.
And the DMG. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying thank you for following. You go ahead.
The Dungeon Master's Guide just as you did, but if you need it officially from a book, it does give caution for any of you who go off of the vanilla rules. I'm going to bring this up in my other presentation window here. All right, we're in Chapter 9, the Dungeon Master's Workshop. Before you add a new rule to your campaign, ask yourself 2 questions. Will the rule improve the game? Will my players like it? And that gets into that fun crap that Sprigg was talking about. So yes, will people have fun? And the fun check for something like this, let alone, we should also ask then, is this something that, how can we tie it to the sci-fi theme? Now, low magic and hard magic is fine because we understand that there's a sacrifice to it. That's a little bit easier. And also the source of magic, because this is coming at a personal cost as well. I get that. So the big question, how can we tie it into the sci-fi aspect that the thing makes the person incredible? But if I'm playing a melee, if I'm a fighter, I would have an aptitude score as well, because it's a 7th score that everyone gets. But I'm not... So if I'm the fighter and I'm not sacrificing strength to hit harder, but a wizard is the wizard having fun? And I fully understand every person, every table's going to be different, or that there's a certain buy-in to say, I get it, I'm playing in this environment. It's like saying, I want to cast divine spells in Arthas and Dark Sun. Look, you're going to have to accept that you don't have that as an option, by default anyway. So, is this, how can we make this thematic but also fun for a wizard to say, you know what, I will eat another score to be hit in order to get something that a fighter by default doesn't need to sacrifice? Or do they?
Okay, so an idea, like, in that token is, there is a kind of, like, slightly horrific comic called The Suit Keeps Me Alive.
Okay.
It is very much an 18+ thing, so, like, if you are interested in looking it up, be warned, it is body horror. So the premise of the comic is like a person in a sci-fi setting is in a suit that is trying to keep them alive. It's broken, but it's keeping them alive. And they're stranded in the middle of nowhere on a planet, and they have to walk for unfathomable distances. So the suit is like recycling everything in the system to keep the person alive and keep them moving. And it gets terrifying, but it would be a good example of a source for this idea of like having the ability where, what I was talking about before, you can sacrifice other ability scores to pump up your aptitude.
Okay.
So it would be like, in the moment, I need a boost to my aptitude. I'm gonna cut 3 points off my wisdom to put it into here instead.
Well, you mean in a temporary basis, or this is a part of the person, that this is long term? You are permanently damaging your ability to have reason or cognizance.
Do it either way. Like, you could make it a temporary boost and then it's restored at the end of a rest, or you could make it a permanent thing. The way it works in the game that I sourced the idea from, at least, Outward, is permanent, where you spend from your hit points and your stamina to pump up your magic. Um, so for outward, for the example, you can only ever use half of your magic total when you wake up in the morning. But the longer you stay awake, the more of your amount unlocks. But it does the opposite with your health and stamina, where the more damage you take, the lower your max health gets before you rest and fully recover. And then your stamina also gets reduced the longer you go between rests. And, the longer that your rest will have to be to restore those maximums.
I'm setting up while you're talking, I am listening. I'm also setting up an exercise here. From things like sanity and honor, going from the default DMG, we can always modify. It recommends if you ever have something like sanity or honor that you include it, like on a standard spread. It starts at 10, and so you could choose it at that, or if you wanted to sacrifice it and start with lower honor at your 8, if you go with a standard array, you could. But otherwise, it's a 10 that's included in the score, or I think it was an extra 3 points if you're doing point buy. And of course, if you're rolling stats, you're rolling stats, and no one is going to tell you otherwise. So,
thank you for the follow, Shade. Welcome to the Kobold Line.
Well, let's say we build a melee character. So we do something like 15, 14, 13. In fact, maybe we just choose that our aptitude gets that 8. And then we go...
That is okay, partner Close. If you'd like to finish, you're welcome to. I hope that you have a very good night.
So at level 1, it doesn't matter. It could be a barbarian or whatever. It doesn't even have to be wisdom. But we would tend to want to go towards a higher physicality. So we have a 15, 14, 13, 8, 10, 12, 10. Now, a caster then... either would start at the 15, which if we're going with the concept of well, every spell caster is going to have maybe by default maximum, whatever that is, we might start that way, and everything else is lesser. But or if we start out with a hard, everyone starts at 10 with equal opportunity aptitude. So we'll just make charisma the dump here. Let's pretend, I guess, that it's fixed. Then we go, I don't know, if we have a muscle wizard, really, I guess the stats would be the same. It'd just be the sacrifices that we make in order to pour into aptitude instead. Now that I want the rubber to hit the road here, I'm thinking, because I like the concept. We don't really have an equivalent for melee, and maybe that's fine in this world because magic is doing exceptional things, and it's low magic, meaning not everyone is going to have this.
All magic items also use the aptitude.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, you get a damage bonus on your magic sword equal to the modifier of the aptitude.
So you have to have at least like a +1 modifier to wield a +1 weapon or something like that. So if you want to...
I wouldn't say that you have to. I would say the weapon's bonus is equal to your aptitude bonus.
Oh,
so then you have to burn a stat to get the bonus out of the sword. But the sword gets bigger stat bonuses the more that you burn.
Yeah, okay, so it grows with you. It grows with your potential. So maybe instead of aptitude, if we just call this potential, some people might be born with the ability to have it, it could be from themselves, but everyone does need this potential to wield something. So even a fighter would have to weigh that, do I want to sacrifice my strength in order to go above and beyond what any other human fighter or whatever can do, because I can now wield magic weapons, and so the item is making me the exception to the rule. Because we can have 3 people all with strength 15. That's fine. That's an exceptional norm. But I can swing at a higher because I'm tapping. Yeah, I'm tapping that magic reserve. And what have I given up in order for that to be able to do that? In order to have this higher potential to do more. Okay.
So it would basically be like a +1 weapon. Instead of being a +1 weapon, it would be a potential weapon, and then it adds your potential modifier on top.
Okay. And we can always discuss, well, how rare or expensive are magic items, but I think getting these ideas out first as a core concept is going to be more important than hemming and hawing over the economy of something.
You can also do things like a magic item. Instead of having charges, it causes your potential, your damage to your potential stat. So like, I have wand of fireball. I'm gonna cast fireball, but it deals D4 D4 damage to my potential score that's only restored a little bit at a time each long rest.
Okay. So if we were, let's see. So if we sacrifice a part of ourself that is mechanically, we give up dex, our AC would theoretically go down, but if we put that into aptitude for magic armor, the items are supplanting our loss of natural ability by increased things that way.
But then we get that +2 to our AC from the armor, but we still have the -2 to our dex saves. So everything becomes a cost benefit and a choice of what do we pay for us, like, more powerful bonus.
Yeah.
How much is it worth to me to purchase that higher AC?
That almost comes back around to the talk about cyberpunk, or like especially in Cyberpunk Red, where you can get incredible stuff done to your body, but it also can malfunction or go wrong. Or what are you giving up? As you approach now, there's a check that's built into the system about cyberpsychosis and the loss of humanity. Now, whether or not there's something like that exists here, maybe not. Humanity, for sure, can come up in a game like that, and especially Vampire the Masquerade, where you're that's the battle. Is how machine to human are you, or how monster to human are you? In this case, I think it would be giving up your natural potential for this magical potential and supplanting yourself. You still would be rare. People could catch you off guard, but you could also do fantastic things. Okay, so this is one way forward. We don't need this to be 100% polished. I think this is a good start idea in something for balancing. This does then check off that this would be sci-fi. This is more item-based. This is more the items are going to set people apart in how they use the items. This is still going into low magic. Not everyone is willing to give up parts of themselves for something like that. Magic is known and quantifiable. That would play into it. And the source of magic is just that. It is a part of you. So I think this idea can work to bring a setting in line. Go ahead.
And for Nina's question in your chat too, I feel like in this same token, because you spend your aptitude score on using magic items, You could have, like, a powered armor type thing that gives you bonuses to strength, but it costs your aptitude to use it. So you don't need the stinking magic, but you're spending the same stat bonus on powered armor that can fulfill the same role.
Yeah. Yeah, there might be some environmental or external thing too that would reward. Like in Cyberpunk, it would be very clear if you walk through a metal detector. Well, I mean, there's a way around everything, but generally, people can tell if you're chromed through detection of overt or covert means, and so it might behoove you to have a higher average where you're not feeding your aptitude or your potential, because you would rather have a higher average than be a super specialist in something. Okay. And have a good night, Belladonna. Thank you for popping in and saying hi.
Bye.
When we were doing our pre-show talk and getting things set up to have you appear on camera and everything here as well, I was reminded of a magic item system that I had that I'd used in one of my worlds, in my local world, not the one at Zuvi WoW, for the campaign that was run here. And what the gist of it was, in order to create a magic item, you needed a normal item. You needed a material that the players ended up calling morphium. I wanted it to be called insight, but INCITE, but my players commandeered it and wanted to call it morphium. And so a normal item is created normally. This insight or this morphium was created when an item was used for. I mean, we could make a fixed schedule, but it was really to get people involved in the story. But it would play into, this is so-and-so's sword, or these were the boots of so-and-so, right? There's a story to it. So an item that was used, that blood, sweat, tears, memories, and everything was put into, could then be rendered down into this this material, this kind of gel that existed, and then that what I called insight, magic stone, whatever MacGuffin, what you want to call it, was then put with an item you wanted to make magical. And so that experience, that use of something, would enhance an item in a specific way. Now, you could render a sword that you used in this pitched battle, and you could put it on a belt or on a mask or something, of course, because you're sort of charging. You're charging this material with that use and those memories. And then through a magical or alchemical means, you would instill it. But what that would mean is that things take time and effort in order to actually imbue with a person, with those memories, with those experiences. And that would play into the properties. Where if you wanted to just use it for its raw potential, if you had you had a sword and you killed 100 people with it, it would be more receptive to enchanting something that did what it was made to do, or what it was rendered from. But you could use it to a lesser effect if you wanted to, make boots of springing and striding or whatever that you were talking about earlier. You could, but you would be using this thing in a different way. I never had a hard and fast. I kept it somewhat of a soft system. It was understood how it worked. The players generally figured it out. And I said, well, it doesn't feel, you haven't put in enough work for this item to kind of resonate yet. But in this case, it actually took time to create the magic items, and it took the memories. It took you actually becoming a part of this story, or at least about the legendary item that was going to be, that was either going to be made or that existed and could be rendered down and put into something else. It sort of, you passed on your memories, as we as humans do when, when we have kids or we help raise and teach the next generation, etc. We're imparting our stories and our memories, our skills, the things that we've done into this new person, into this new item, effectively. And so a magic item system like that, it leaves a lot of room for narration, but does encourage participation by battle, by doing heroic deeds, by having you spring in stride. You have a lucky pair of boots. They're normal ones, and you use them as normal boots, but you did enough incredible stuff in them that that energy, that potential, could then be imbued into something else that also did have to be made and created in a particularly good way. And so it just encouraged more involvement, other than just saying, "Oh, I'm a blacksmith and I hit a piece of metal a couple times and now I have a +1 sword," and there wasn't really, you know, there was nothing really in it. Or you go to the magic store and you just buy a +1 sword like you could buy a bottle of water somewhere. What's the story to it? And there are other rules in the DMG and elsewhere that actually have charts that, if you aren't sure that you could come up with a story about a magic item, you can randomly roll on the table or something. And that was a way to encourage the storytelling, but also make everything be personal, and that you could ultimately make your own weapons, or at least you always had a way that, if you needed money, you could sell the things you had. If there was this potential enough, someone might buy your shirt, and because your shirt has just, it's been through a lot. You traveled across the lands for 3 years in this shirt, and someone can render that down into morphium or insight, and there you go. But then the question is, then, for that, is that playing into low magic, hard magic? Is it personal enough for the source of magic to be thematically from a person? And does this meet the criteria for our sci-fi fantasy, and that the focus are on what things are and do more than the people?
I don't think it fits enough with our source of magic and like the sci-fi feel for like something on that same vein. Um, just personally, at least, I feel like for something sci-fi, it kind of, to sell that sci-fi, you want it to be kind of like some sort of cutting-edge technology that's manufactured under extreme rigor, rather than being a... Although I understand the ghost in the machine idea also could be really fun on the same idea, but it wouldn't feel as low magic anymore.
Okay.
For the low magic, like a low hard magic system, it feels more like the sort of thing that it's like a hyper specialized group or organization or factory or that kind of thing that makes these machines that can use magic. More so than anyone can make a magic item by the whatever epic journeys that they need to go on to make it magical.
Mm-hmm.
So then, to make it that way, one of the ways you could do it for that low magic is you can make it an extremely rare resource that's difficult to find. You get things like, to use a Star Wars example, because I've at least seen The Mandalorian,
Okay.
Beskar steel,
Okay.
where like it's this really, really valuable material where like just a little slip of it is enough to buy a ship. So it's not the kind of thing that just anyone can make into a magic item. And then the source of it, depending on like what kind of tone we want for the setting, you could go with the grimdark and say like it's people that have already have given everything into their aptitude to become that insight material that you talk about, and can be rendered into a material to make items. If we
Okay.
wanted to go with the grimdark route, or we could go with like it is a material that is found extremely rarely in the mantle of certain planets, and that's our incitement to adventure. Or it's only found on asteroids that travel the distance like way beyond the reach of our furthest telescopes. So the only chance we get it is when they come back through our solar system once every 600 years or something like that.
Well, and for what I propose, it doesn't. It doesn't have to go in with that potential or aptitude that we discussed. I want to make sure it's presented. It's an idea that could be standalone or put in there as well. But I see what you're saying about that, and this would require, on its face, because when I made this idea, it certainly wasn't contorting to the focus that we were discussing in chat to come up with these four elements of thematic presentation, our subgenre and everything else. And perhaps, well, in that case, it would almost cost time, because things couldn't just be. That would be the personal cost. And I would also say, too, that it does lend to grimdark, though it would be interesting in a culture where that's actually the ultimate. You have a use and a purpose that if you live a good long life, you will be rendered down and live on as, I don't know, an enchantment to something. Sort of like what would I be? What will I become in my death?
There's people in the modern day who have themselves cremated and turned into birdshot. So.
Yeah, fireworks or diamonds, or they're shot into space or something like that too. So yeah.
But it's like the actual material of what goes into making a magic item is by itself something enormously indicative of the tone that we want to set for our setting.
100%. Is it made of people, or is it made of something that is more flexible or less? I don't know,
is it made of something more or
moral,
less palatable?
Palatable, yeah, palatable, or the morality around it as well. So with this seventh score approach, it is much more of a purposeful. It's a willful thing that you're trying to increase your aptitude. You are accepting all the risks. You're accepting the losses in potential otherwise in your life in order to invest into this direction and put it into aptitude.
TD's idea machines. Thank you for the follow. Welcome to the Kobold Rain.
And Rosewolf, hello. Yeah, insight is people. Although in this case it was their experiences. Now the other part, which we're talking about, is the juice worth the squeeze. The catalyst that allowed this to happen was this is a big a reduction in what it is, but how oil is decomposed dinosaurs, right? Whatever. That's way simple. It's not what it is, but you get what I'm saying. There was a resource that coincided with this that was called vermilium. because it was red and it sounded like petroleum. Except it was red, so it was vermilion. And what that ended up being, and that was part of the mystery to solve, which also explained why there were no true dragons around, is that again, this is also a redux of years of campaigning. The dragons died. Their memories and experiences being these magical creatures that, yeah, they're biological, but the way that they work just is way different. But the vermilion is effectively their oil, and you are using up their wisdom and experience in order to fuel magic item creation. And so it wasn't discovered at the time that those memories could be drawn upon in different ways, but it was just seen as something in the ground that could be used for magical effect, and that there was this ultimate sadness of there are no more dragons, and we're using the last vestiges of them for things like personal convenience instead of generational learning or something else along. Yeah, like it was dragon oil effectively. Siracco.
In my chat, we've got the petrochemical industry is just necromancy.
It's yeah. And so that was a catalyst, and so that was part of the cost, and it was an unknown one to the players at the time to figure out what really is vermilion, how is it made. Everyone uses it, but no one really understood what it was until it was understood, and that kind of shined a whole new light on society, morals, importance of whatever, and that was part of the story I wanted to present as well. Without it was, as much as we can make real life interpretations or sound preachy, I was keeping it separate from any real life issues. It was in its own world. It's whatever. But that was part of the reveal. Was it wasn't just your personal. I walked around in these boots for for a while, and now I can render these down. It was also you needed this greater resource that is very limited. There are no more dragons that anyone knew about, and you ain't getting any more. So how are you using what was left over to you in this world by these people that are no longer around to guide you otherwise? And that kind of comes back around to what you were talking about, a moral conundrum, like the moral last boss. The world that you leave behind in the next campaign is, what do you do with this? It is known what it can do, but now that you have that knowledge, yikes. How are we supposed to handle this or find a new magic when everything exists on the current magic or something along those lines? It kind of reminds me, there was a very potent Star Trek The Next... Did you watch Next Generation at all, Sprigg?
No.
Okay.
The only Star Trek that I've actually watched more than like a single episode of was Lower Decks.
Okay.
I don't tend to watch much TV in general.
I remember there was a very potent episode where it was discovered that warp drives damage subspace and cause bad stuff to happen. We'll just put it that way. Because you're kind of breaching reality. And so too many ships always using warp speed was damaging the whatever subspace continuum or whatever contrivance language, technobabble you want to use. And the scientist that pointed it out ended up proving his point in an interesting way. But the whole point and the weight to that is really from that episode on, there was a knowledge that something that was taken for granted for so long in original, in next gen, and further from next gen with the following seasons and Voyager and blah, 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 what they were doing until they could figure out more, effectively put speed limits on ships,
Mhm.
because otherwise you would be damaging the very medium that you need to perpetuate this travel. And when I was younger and I saw this, I said, you know what? That's, I don't know. That hit me. That hit me really hard. In concept, and the fact that also the writers were willing to sacrifice, not sacrifice, but they were willing to put out something like this, which it would still require innovation. And I don't know if they ever found a way around it, or they switched to a new something or another. But I don't. It felt purposeful. It felt meaningful that this was a world where there were consequences and not always an easy answer. I don't know. Just throw a tachyon beam at it, and there we go. It's done.
Um, I liked. There's another series. Is Cowboy Bebop had a similar-ish in a way thing in one episode. So
With
they
the
don't.
moon?
They only really touch on it on faster than light travel in the series in a single episode where it's the warp gates that like fold space in on itself basically.
Yep.
And then when you pass through another one, it unfolds space and you come back into normal reality. So there was this terror attack that was planned, and they had to weigh the cost. Do we just close the gate and not let anyone out? Or do we let this through and doom the world? And like the main characters, of course, the main characters did their thing and saved the day. But like it was a very serious moral quandary for that episode of like, do you doom all the people in this shipping lane or the world that they're headed to?
Yeah. People make the items. People are the items. There's a cost to it. Moral or physical. I want to throw out, but before we conclude, I want to come up with at least one more idea. So we have three things that work better than others, or whatever. Let's see. What is one other? It can either work with the other things or not. This is very item based, but it has to be personalized.
So what other way to make the items?
Make or use, or otherwise make someone exceptional through items that has a personal cost.
Well, I know one of the things, to me at least, that would be really cool is letting someone burn an ability score to put into their aptitude at any time.
Yeah.
Because then you can get, like, you know, the dramatic moment, I've got the attack on the big bad evil guy moments before he teleports away. It's our last chance to hit him. And I miss by one. I'm gonna sacrifice 2 points off of my charisma right now to get a +2 permanently, so that I get a +1 to hit. Now I hit with the sword. Because that adds a huge gravity that you can remember that moment forever because of the change in the ability scores on your sheet.
Would something... So, on what you said, and even dovetailing that to something that you brought up earlier, which is a simple way to keep people from yo-yoing on the brink of death, because the most efficient way to heal someone is to wait until they drop to 0 hit points, because then they come back, they come back up with full. And this could even arguably be with, not just with overt magic users like a sorcerer, but there's a point as a barbarian, you are doing things that are far and above beyond a normal, like a level 0 type person. Pardon me. What if it was just as simple as levels of exhaustion for class ability use, I mean, we call it melee, but really, if you think about it, the ability to tap into some inner spirit or for monks for ki, what if it really was just a modified exhaustion system such that in that moment with that adrenaline, you're
So,
casting, you're using things, but you suffer lingering effects for overexerting yourself after the battle.
I'm on board for the idea, but I just want to bring up the, like, Berserker Barbarian, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You can enter a frenzy at the cost of gaining an exhaustion later. No one plays Berserker because it's so bad.
Mm-hmm.
um,
But in this
so
case,
it's,
everyone everyone's doing this though.
yeah, I'm just saying it as the, like, because you mentioned the barbarian, we need to make sure that if this is going to be punishing people, it is punishing everyone equally if we're going to use that kind of, like, thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I use the exhaustion when anyone goes down because it makes sure that people avoid going down like they should in the first place. um, but being, like, getting exhaustion for using your class abilities, for example, is going to hit martial characters disproportionately way harder than
Mm-hmm.
spellcasters. And martials already need help to catch up to spellcasters.
Hmm. What about something like healer's kit dependency? Now, this is only saying it's only about dealing resting or healing during resting. A character can't spend any hit dice after finishing a short rest until someone expends one use of a healer's kit to bandage and treat the character's wounds. In the circumstance where everything else is equal, but healing, which everyone in some way needs, whether you're a caster, divine, arcane, or you're a barbarian or a ranger or whatever, if instead healing, in this case magical healing, something accelerated requires that magic item, there is something that is a personal cost, if not time, to naturally heal, or something that the healer's kit isn't just a roll of gauze and a clip or something to hold the bandage in place, but making this is a very core part of battle or exploration in D&D, and that we often treat very fluidly, like, oh yeah, I as a fighter went from 100 hit points down to 20. Of whatever nebulousness that hit points is, because it could be a lot of different things. I've lost 80% of that, but mechanically, until I hit 0, I can have a billion hit points, or I can have 1 hit point, and I'm exactly the same. So in this case, if there's that technological, that the healing is dependent on this item, this very personal item or something, maybe that.
I understand, like, the idea of it, but again, it's gonna disproportionately hit martial characters a lot harder. Because anyone who is a melee character is going to take damage more often.
Mm.
So, like, having a cost on getting healed is going to hit them even harder than it would hit in general.
What if a caster incurs damage, even if it's something smaller proportional, like a hit point per spell level per cast, that it's damage as you're channeling this energy through your body? Yeah, you're probably dealing more than you take, but there's at least a constant loss.
Mm-hmm.
Any speed bumps or thoughts on that?
And, like, I've done it before. Like, I did it for a class, like I mentioned before. I'm not sure, because I think the idea of it is not a bad one on its face by itself. Um, and idea machines, I see the ideas that you're putting forward too, like sacrificing con for spell slots or hit dice or burning hit dice to buff damage and stuff. Um, I'm trying to think on this one, because this is a... Sorry, I'm trying to remember where we got to here from, because it might be, like... I'm thinking it might be better to reboot on this point,
Okay.
in a sense.
Then we just go back up to the 4 fixed things that we know we need in a campaign setting. The focuses are on the things that make people exceptional. Or at least that's what lets them do exceptional things like defy gravity or blah, blah, blah. People can still use their natural strength and wit, but the exceptional people are made by the items. That's the sci-fi part of our sci-fi fantasy. Low magic, in
so
that it's rare. Okay.
One thing that we could use for an example that just popped back to mind is a long rest. You can't just get a long rest by sleeping.
Okay.
We can change it to go with the idea of something along the lines of gritty realism rests, where a short rest is 8 hours rest, and it's like just out on its own. And the only way to get the benefits of long rest, like D&D traditional type long rest, is using like a recovery capsule type machine.
Okay. Ooh,
So
all right.
it takes the same amount of time, but it's this special machine fully restores you instead of just taking a nap and then being better. Because then it gives us more value to the idea of... In the sci-fi, for example, you would have these recovery capsules on your ship. Do you have enough recovery capsules for everyone on your ship?
Mm-hmm.
Or do some people have to not use one and have to get by with just a normal rest? And then it gives us more of that choice and more of needing to make decisions of the source of magic. For example, if you only have one pod, only one party member can get the full restoration on this rest. Who's it gonna be? Who needs it the most?
As well, what could the cost be for that accelerated healing too?
And idea machines, yes, we're familiar with like the gritty realism. Maddie has it open right now on his stream as well. We're talking about something that is not necessarily just D&D. We're writing essentially a supplement to the system on the principles that are on screen right now on my end.
Because time is still that ultimate resource in a gritty realism, slower recovery of hit points and spell slots as well. So that would affect meleeers and casters.
Yeah, but like, typically speaking, your martial characters are able to bounce back using just short rests. Like all their features restore on short rests for the most part. But then by having this machine be a requirement to get the benefits of a full long rest, you can, as a DM, say, your ship only has 2, your ship only has 1, something like that. Or you have to go out of your way to return to your ship instead of just resting in the field, or you have to rest in a town because that's where these machines are available. There's a thing that you have to have to be able to rest, and it can't move with you, is the idea.
Okay.
Because it leans into that hard magic system and the low magic system of, like, telling the story of not everyone is so super special. You can't just bounce back from this life or death fight with a nap on a log in the woods.
Yeah. Again, you go from 120 hit points down to 2, and then you get to sleep overnight, and you're like, yeah, I'm ready to do that all again in the morning. Yeah.
I know the idea, at least, is that, like, going to 0 is the first time that you actually get hit.
Yeah.
But it's, well, maybe not necessarily the first time you get hit, but the first time you get injured. Hi, Doozy.
Yeah. We I think, or at least I have the tendency to, because I think we want that swashbuckling, or that, I take so many hits, and because you are superhuman in a fantasy, when in the broad concept of it, 0, the general of an army goes down to 1 bullet, just like a private this is their first deployment. So it's just how much stress can you weather in between.
Yeah, I know one that some people have mentioned in my chat before as an example is Nathan Drake from the Uncharted series.
Mm-hmm.
Is like every time that you take damage in game, he's not actually getting hit. He's not actually getting hurt. He dies to 1 bullet. It's just that you are getting hit and HP going down is his luck starting to run out.
Oh, yeah.
So the reason that your health regenerates is because you're getting a break, you're getting out of danger, and then it's a new dangerous situation again. So, like, the way that I've interpreted HP in D&D and games similar is usually more like stamina.
Yeah.
So, like, you're getting bumped around, you're getting hit, but your armor is absorbing the worst of it, you're parrying at the very last second. And you're wearing down over time until something actually connects.
I wonder if something as simple as that, as changing not a lot else, except swapping out hit points for another concept that might have one small rule as a writer,
Yeah.
can actually
Just change
accomplish.
the name from HP to grit.
Because then we're talking about things like personal luck or some sort of an endurance. Huh.
Because, like, something I used to do when I first started my Twitch account, actually, before I started VTubing and everything, was I used to do Blade and Sorcery is a VR game that I have. That's what I mentioned earlier for, like, the using Zweihanders and stuff, that I understand how difficult it is to wield them.
Yes.
As a small creature. What I used to do, that's what I did for my cardio every day. Is I would get into Blade and Sorcery and I would just start up endless mode and go for as long as I could before I died. And when you're 2 hours into fighting with a sword, you are so exhausted. I could barely lift my arms sometimes by the time I was dying. And that was like, this is what 1 hit point feels like. This is like, I have 3 guys running at me. I'm struggling to lift my arms and put the sword in the way.
That makes sense. It might be as simple and elegant as that. And I hope for all of you who are watching, or if you're listening over on Spriggs, remember the point of this is a conversation to flesh out these ideas. I'm not looking to overhaul D&D. I'm not looking to even create an entirely new system. Those can be done. But this is more, can you take vanilla D&D and with a couple small tweaks, not revamping the big chunk of it or something, but with some ideas, can you thematically shift the focus away from generic vanilla D&D into, well, in our example here, sci-fi fantasy, low magic, hard magic, and the source of magic. It doesn't really matter what it is. We didn't say it had to be you're paying with your blood or whatever, but there has to be a personal cost to the magic. And so looking at what magic is, or just like what Sprigg prompted, what are hit points? Changing the entire concept of hit points might be a way to...
Yeah, like, my D&D campaigns, to use the example again, losing hit points, the only time that my characters actually get an injury more severe than bruises is if they get hit with a crit or lose more than a quarter of their hit points in one shot.
Oh, that now is that custom or is that a take? There's a massive damage alternate
Yeah,
rule.
it's
Like,
my interpretation of the massive damage rules is just instead of like,
okay,
oh yeah, you took a quarter of your health in one shot, you're down now, it's, you have a permanent scar from this.
yeah, lingering injuries, system shock from massive damage as well.
I'm not using lingering injuries exactly, but I'm using something similar. Mostly just like cosmetics. So like, there was an encounter around level 5. The druid of the party got hit with a crit and lost half of her health in one turn.
Mm-hmm.
She lost half of a toe.
Okay.
Or like, the wizard was nearly killed. Mechanically he was actually instantly killed in a single hit.
Mm-hmm.
But because he had literally gained 0 HP at that level up the session before, I was like, you know what? If you had gained even a single hit point when you leveled up, you would not be instantly dead right now. So what we're gonna do is you're downed, you're incapacitated, you have 2 failed death saves, you have to make 1 more before anyone can get to you and stabilize you.
Okay.
And he got, like, his throat slashed and he could no longer speak. They had to find a way to give him his ability to speak back. So he couldn't use verbal components of spells anymore for, like, 3 sessions after that.
In your opinion, would it be too onerous if things, even attacking, let alone casting a spell, if there was a way for a character to somehow, you have way more hit points, and hit points can be depleted by being hit in the broad concept, but your extra exertions through your class or whatever being magical, you're doing above and beyond what a farmer, like average everyday person, 10 strength score, whatever. What if everything was depleted? It would hit meleeers and casters. You would also deplete it by taking hits, because it is more that stamina, like what you were talking about. You weren't being physically injured with your Zweihander. You weren't breaking ribs, but it was exhausting, and you can only fight for so long. Casting spells would have that effect on your body. Presumably, it strains your mind, or it stresses your muscles to have magical energy tear through it or something. Could that be a simple and elegant way, through some sci-fi lens, to where everyone's hit point pools are larger, but the second you are, like, you get into combat, that is almost the ticking countdown, where you really can only operate so long.
A way to get the same feel while feeling good for the players would be adding the ability to spend a hit die to add to your hit or damage. Now you're spending your ability to recover from combat on fighting harder.
Okay.
Or you could use it like as a reaction to add to your AC, for example. So now you're spending your ability to recover, you're spending your stamina on, like, doing better in combat. So rather than losing your ability to do combat, you are gaining a new ability to spend a resource on combat.
You know, Sprigg, now that you're bringing that you're bringing hit dice into it, you did remind me of something I liked thematically about 4th Ed. In 4th edition, everyone had hit points, and they had hit dice. When you were cured, when a cure spell went off, it used your hit dice because that is your pool of potential energy. And so when you are being actively cured, it was reducing that longevity to remain in a combat situation, because eventually you run out of hit dice and you can no longer have that accelerated healing or whatever, re-energizing or something. And so maybe by simply shifting, like you always have that little bit of hit points you're floating, but your potential is what's tapped. And so your any active healing or something even like a combat could dip into that energy pool that this is my everything I can do today before I have hit an extreme. I'm mentally, physically, or spiritually exhausted and can't go on. Maybe that might be a small but subtle shift to bring this around.
So I did something similar, but in the exact way that you're mentioning, at least. I think healing magic is already kind of bad enough.
Okay.
Like it doesn't do very much. But what I did in a similar vein is healing potions. I made those spend, instead of gaining 2d4 plus 2 for a healing potion, it's 2 hit dice plus 2. So it's an item that lets you borrow healing from your short rest in the middle of a fight, and I just made it a bonus action instead of an action to use.
Oh, well, yeah. So a healing spell would simply stimulate your natural hit dice. So curing a D4, D6 character would be different than curing a D12 hit die, because the D12ers would be rolling the D12 to recover.
The idea is, like, as a spell, you're spending the spell, which you could spend on damage or all these other things, and you're spending the hit dice, so it's a debuff on the healing spell. So it makes the healing worse for the healer, when healing is already one of the worst things to do with your spell slots. In 5th edition. So it's a good idea to add it on an item.
Yeah.
Because it's something that you can expend infinitely otherwise. So it makes it stronger on the item, but it costs more to use it. But on magic, it's already costing something, so adding additional cost without, like, significantly improving the power is pretty not great.
Okay. I wonder if a part of the healing, though, being that power. Well, I say powerful, probably lack of power from what you're saying, is to make it less inclined that you can just sit back and play the infinite heal defensive game, and more that it's more like a managed decline. Like, yeah, it's really tough to heal your way out of a protracted engagement, because you're not getting the returns.
Because, like, you don't get much healing out of a spell.
Oh.
So, like, to use Cure Wounds as an example, I changed Cure Wounds and Healing Word at my table. I reversed their action costs. So I made Cure Wounds into a bonus action instead of an action, and Healing Word into an action instead of a bonus action.
Yes.
To use Cure Wounds is D8 plus Wisdom modifier, D8 plus Spell modifier healing. Or I could cast, Burning Hands as a first level damage example, 3d6 fire damage to everything in a 15-foot cone. Which would mean that I can hit 3, 4, 5, 6 creatures for up to 18 damage all at the same time. So you were, like, in 5th edition D&D and in a lot of other systems, you're always incentivized to do damage over healing someone, because healing someone is always less value for your action economy.
It is easier to destroy than build.
Yeah, so, like, giving additional debuffs 2 healing magic is pretty bad.
Okay.
And you know what? Thank you for the follow. Welcome to the Kobold Warrior. I think what you would want to do instead, if you were going to do that, is anytime you heal with a spell, they may spend a hit die in addition to the healing spell. Because then you're getting a meaningful buff to the healing and the additional cost for that buff. Because just making it cost hit dice, you're going to make healing even less incentivized, so just no one's going to do it. It doesn't meet the class fantasy anymore, so they're just never going to use it.
You know, hit dice... Again, you keep making a lot of good points here, Sprigg. The concept of hit dice in 5e as something that is a resource, beyond it being kind of tied to how many hit points you have. It's obviously a lot easier to say, oh, I have 100 hit points, and you just subtract a number from that maximum. But I don't think there's a lot that mechanically relies on hit dice for anything. It almost feels vestigial. Like a holdover from 4th edition used hit dice as a healing resource, as a part of the character.
So, the big thing for hit dice in 5th edition is that it's used for your short rest healing, and that's basically it.
Yeah.
So, like, there's that, and then Dwarven Resilience is dwarves get a racial feat that if they take the dodge action, they can spend a hit die and regain hit points.
So it's very underutilized.
It's very underutilized. That's why like I mentioned before, I wrote a whole class around it. I've written racial features around it. I've used hit dice quite a bit in my other projects since. In particular, the biggest problem with hit dice is not actually the problem with hit dice itself, it's the problem with resting in 5th edition D&D. There's never a reason to short rest when you could long rest. That's the problem. Because everything is restored on a long rest. Only a little bit is restored on a short rest.
And also, how many battles? That's the other big thing. If you're expected to have like 3 battles a day, I personally don't run games that have that much battle going on. Battles already take a lot of time. I'll run one big one, but then it just turns into a huge battle of attrition of, well, look, if we're going to fight, I'm going to fight you. And then it becomes super deadly because I have to tax your resources. I need to make it interesting. I mean, hopefully, I'm not trying to kill you, but it might happen because this is all I got. I'm not going to throw, like, a wave of goblins and then you adventure for 2 rooms and throw you a small wave of goblins. At least my style. But a lot of my friends who I play under or I've heard from other people say, the expectation you're getting 3-4 battles in a day. I don't know what kind of D&D sessions you're playing, but that's not my style, and so you tend to sit on a ton of extra resources and spell slots, because if you get it all back on the rest, yeah, you're right. You might as well have infinite hit points and infinite spell slots, because you alpha strike everything every battle because they're so rare. But also as a DM, I don't want to run 3 or 4 battles. I want to tell a story. There's a lot of other things I want to do. So,
yeah, there's a lot you need to do other than combat in an adventuring day.
Yeah.
So if you look at Horde of the Dragon Queen, the module we mentioned earlier,
okay,
that is a staple example of what they intended an adventuring day to look like. The very beginning of that campaign. And it is a meat grinder because of it. Shard ran it just a little while ago, and her group, with the dice that they rolled, level 1 characters, it was intended to be level 1 characters. She started them at level 2 and then leveled them up to 3 before they even reached the keep. They intend you to be level 1 characters to fight, in her game at least, it was 68 kobolds, 22 cultists, and 9 acolytes, I think it was. Then an adult blue dragon. Then I think it was 4 swarms of rats. then 4 ambush drakes and another 20 cultists and another 20 kobolds. Then go back to the keep, then fight another 3 ambush drakes, or another, 3 ambush drakes or guard drakes, whichever it was, and another, 12 cultists and another 35 kobolds. Then you get your first rest. As level 1 characters.
I'm sure you all can hear the the emotion or frustration in Sprigg's voice there with that. And with that I agree.
That's what they expected an Adventuring Day to be when they started writing 5th edition, because they wrote that module before they finished writing the classes, I think.
Huh.
Dancing time!
Yeah. Let's not be frustrated. We're dancing. There we go. Dance all the...
I'm not frustrated. It's just, oh my goodness, the color shift hits the background too.
No, I know you're not that you're not personally upsetty. Just it was a good break of wow, all this other stuff, and we're brainstorming. But you know what? I think just taking a moment to shift colors and to dance is a good way to.
It's just that was an example of a module that was written for that style.
Yeah.
And it really, really shows. And not much of anyone runs a campaign that way. Even the modules that they wrote after that don't play anything like that.
Yeah. By the way, for any of you out there, with all the color shifting and the fact I have her on a green screen, can someone clip that about that minute of her color shifting so we could see the book through her and everything as she was changing? That'd be delightful. Please and thank you.
The whole green screen was visible on my end too.
Yeah. And then when you shifted green, you blended into the background also. So that was.
Yep.
Yeah, we have a little bit of a chameleon blended in with your Kobold DNA there. So. Well, we covered a lot of territory here, Sprigg. It's getting to be about midnight my time. I know it's late for you. So are you going to continue streaming tonight, or are you gonna button things up?
I've got a little bit more time for my usual time slot.
All right, I'll tell you what then. Let's do this.
I feel bad about ending early yesterday, so I'd like to keep going a bit.
Then I will do this. There are 25 heroes watching here, and I will come over and raid you. And that way I can get things just on my end. I need to rest. It's been a day, and get things done. Plus, I want to sit on what we've talked about and think about it and see if I can find some sort of at least slightly elegant way to draw on some of these ideas that we're just sort of spitballing out there, and be able to present back to you all and to everyone who's watching or listening as well. So. I'll tell you what, everyone, that's what we'll do. You can come along in the raid. If you are in my channel, we will go over. And, Sprigg, what are you going to be playing after we raid into you here?
I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to just jump into some Helldivers and see what the most recent update is like. Because it's something I can do relatively quick.
Yeah.